This short example shows how eValid can be used as part of a security testing campaign to protect yourself against exploits that involve the use of query. Now, it's beyond the scope of this short discussion now to describe all the different ways that a query exploit can occur. But in the majority of cases, what happens is the users, the bad guys, the attackers, are able to manipulate the query string, the query that goes into a particular input field. Now, in this case, we've got a form called query form where the method is a post, and the action is to go to this query output page. So, in truth, when you imagine that a security breach is occurring, it's going to be because the bad guys have inserted something into the string which causes a security breach. And we're going to illustrate in this simple example how eValid has a simple playback test to determine if an exploit has occurred. Now, of course, you could also do a security check, a simple test to simply identify those pages that have an unprotected method. But here I want to go one step a little bit further and show what happens when you actually have an exploit. So here is a passage of HTML. It isn't the most beautiful HTML, but it produces a page that looks like the following. So if you notice, it has a place where you say name and an email, and there's a button. This is an image, by the way, so this is not a live page. There's a button, so it says submit the query. So that's this page here. So in practice, if that were the page and I was typing in, here's where I would type in some name, and possibly I would type in some email address. Now, if I were the bad guy, I would be typing in something in addition to this, which would be a cross-site scripting defect injection, for example. And if I did do that kind of an exploit, then this is the kind of thing that can happen. It's very, very trivial to append strings to this input field to produce this kind of crazy effect. Now, as you know, this particular response is not part of, as you can see, this is not part of the original page. So I've penetrated that page by taking advantage of the window of opportunity that exists in this query form. Now, the test that we're showing here is a script that's shown below. And what the script basically does is type in just the material we've seen, press the query button, and now what we've done is we've provided in our test case for illustration purposes the phrase exploit. So if I were actually doing this test, the eValid test, which would be looking for the absence, would be looking for the absence of XSS in the page, but if the XSS is actually in the page, as it's shown here, because of the exploit, then eValid would identify the XSS string, and it would produce this particular error message. You get a red screen here because the test has successfully failed to identify the absence of a particular string. Sorry about the double negatives. The test's purpose is to confirm that the page wasn't penetrated, but the test, in fact, was penetrated. Here's an explanation which you can look at in detail that shows exactly how the script operates and the key parts that identify that particular phrase. And so here is the phrase we're looking for, exploit, and that's not found, but because of the way the command is running, it's a synchronization command, and so after 504 milliseconds, eValid does find the word exploit at a certain location on the page, and XXS is not found, which is good news, but we did find the word exploit, so that will produce an error message, and away we go. So at the end of the results, we can record that information in a little log file, which you can use to determine that your page hasn't been tampered with. Now, to summarize, what eValid is doing in this application is being used as an engine to test whether a particular kind of exploit was applied to a particular page. Now, a necessary characteristic of this kind of security testing is that you need to be able to deal with lots of double negatives, because security results from the absence of this kind of an exploit. So what you're trying to do is to demonstrate that something hasn't happened, and the way to do that is to see if it hasn't happened by checking to make sure certain properties of the page are left in place.